Thank you, conference. Thank you. 60 years ago, Tutor Eid, the Member of Parliament for South Shields and the Home Secretary in the great reforming Labour government of 1945, turned down the immigration application of a man who wanted to live in the UK. The man had spent the war years in Britain, but he'd gone back to Belgium in 1945 to find his wife and his daughter who'd spent the war there. His son had been with him in the UK during the war. He'd gone to school. He then joined the Royal Navy. The man who filed that immigration application was my grandfather. The man who served in the Royal Navy was my dad. And today, I am the proud Member of Parliament for South Shields, the same constituency as Tutor Eid, that Home Secretary. My predecessor as Labour Foreign Secretary in that great reforming government was Ernest Bevin. And Bevin once offered his vision of foreign policy to this conference. He said in the late 1940s that he wanted to be able to go to Victoria Station and buy a train ticket and travel anywhere around Europe without the threat of war or conflict or violence. That bright hope out of the dark days of war can motivate us today. If they could do it, then so can we. So this is the test for every speech and every session of this conference: to defeat fatalism and replace it with hope. In foreign policy, that's hard. Think of the terrible, murderous bombing in Islamabad on Saturday. Iran trying to acquire a nuclear weapon. Sudan seemingly stuck in endless conflict. Russia invading its neighbour, greenhouse gases rising. And now, as Alistair explained this morning, a global banking crisis. That world and that story leads some people to say that if you draw a straight line from here to the future, you get chaos. They are the fatalists. But there is a different story, a story that should give pride to our party and pride to our country. It's a story that speaks directly to our values. Think of Kenya. In December last year, Kenya was on the verge of civil war. Children were battered to death. Women were herded into churches, and the churches were then burned down. Yet today, Kenya has a democratically elected prime minister. Conference, take pride in this, that he told me that the avoidance of civil war, the installation of a democratic government, would not have happened without Britain. Take pride in this too, that in May the world came together in Dublin to agree a global ban on cluster munitions. Cluster munitions which maim and mutilate long after a conflict is over. Those talks were deadlocked. And the deadlock was broken by one man, our Prime Minister, Gordon Brown. That is the sort of difference he makes in the world. Conference, I have visited Kabul and Kandahar, Basra and Baghdad, talked to our armed services, our diplomats, our aid workers, people going to the toughest places. But I've also talked to Afghans and to Iraqis, and what do they want? They want a future free from fear. But they need young British men and women, some of them not even in their 20s, to fight the dust and the danger, to go out on roads where their friends have been attacked and sometimes killed in order to make the security possible for those people to have a future free from fear. So, conference, take pride in the fact that the British people produced armed services that around the world are a force for decency and good all over the world. And let's be proud too of things that aren't a matter of life and death. Over the next 4 years, the eyes of the world are going to turn to London, our capital city, the greatest capital city in the world. And they're going to turn to us because we are hosting the Olympics in 2012. Remember, 1996, 1 gold medal. 2008, 19 gold medals and 42 in the Paralympics. 1996, £53 million of taxpayers' money spent on sport. 2008, over £400 million of taxpayers' money spent on sport. Take greatest pride in the athletes, their coaches, their families who gave them support. But let's have a little bit of pride that it was a Labour government that made that investment possible. And then the handover ceremony. Mayor Boris Johnson. The decimation of the British fashion industry in one photo opportunity. Conference. Let's resolve this. That the Labour government, which brought the Olympics to Britain, will be the Labour government that hosts the Olympics in Britain in 2012. Fatalism or hope. The difference is about us. It's about our confidence in our values and our ability to apply them in radical new ways in very changed circumstances, not just at home, but abroad too. And this is our claim. It's a very big claim. That if you want order and stability in the modern world, then you need progressive values to put them into practice. Think about it. Our party was created over 100 years ago to extend democracy and equal rights in our country. And we all know we've still got a way to go. But if we want to protect ourselves now, in the modern world, we don't just need to advance democracy in Britain. We need to advance democracy and equal rights right around the world. Why? Because a world order in which authoritarian governments oppress their own people is a threat to stability, not just in those countries, but is a threat to our stability too. That is why we are in Afghanistan at all. People say we should just pursue the terrorists with military means. And we do need to pursue them. But in Afghanistan, the alternative to a democratic government, properly elected, is a Taliban government, not elected at all, overrunning the country and providing a safe space for al-Qaeda. That's why our values of democracy matter in the modern world. And think too of our responsibilities today towards Pakistan. Over 800,000 British citizens have heritage in Pakistan. Let us say today, we mourn with the people of Pakistan in their days of terrible loss. We reach out to those Britons of Pakistani origin, and we say to them, you are our friends, our relatives, our neighbors, our fellow citizens, and we grieve with you too. And let me say this as well. I know that this conference will join me in the resolve that I expressed to President Zardari yesterday on the telephone. We will stand with the people of Pakistan as they fight this evil, and we will stand with them shoulder to shoulder as long as it takes. Conference, it's our belief in democracy that requires us to say that the right people to choose the government of Georgia are the citizens of Georgia, not the residents of the Kremlin. Conference, when I think of those Zimbabwean refugees that I met on a cold Sunday morning in Johannesburg, brought together at the Johannesburg Methodist Central Church by voluntary organizations, some of those Zimbabwean refugees, too shell-shocked by the killing and the brutality, even to express the loss of their husbands, their wives, and their children. When I think of those people, I know we have to stay resolute in supporting the people of Zimbabwe in their determination to make sure they end the one-party rule of Robert Mugabe. And conference, there is something else. We know there is nothing more fundamental to peace and reconciliation in the world than stability in the Middle East. A secure Israel living alongside a viable Palestinian state. And for many years, the commitment to a two-state solution has been made from this platform by successive Home Secretaries. That commitment, if it is not realized soon, will become impossible. And so we have a responsibility with our partners in the European Union, with Russia, to build on the work that has been started by the current US administration and ensure that the next US administration dedicates itself to this project from day one, January the 20th, 2009. People do want to live in a democracy, not just here, but all over the world. It's not a Western thing, it's a universal thing to be able to control your own life. But people also know that they need an income, a job, housing, shelter, the ability to keep body and soul together. In this party, we believe it is our job to close the gap between rich and poor. Poverty does matter. But so does inequality, and nowhere more so than at the international level. International inequality, global inequality, is not just about aid. It's about trade. It's about conflict prevention. It's about good governance. It's also about, and this is something we've learned in the last 10 years, it's about the supreme test of the 21st century politics. Not a technological test, but a political test of whether we can rise to the challenge of climate change. Now is the time, with oil prices high and hitting family budgets, to say energy efficiency, renewable energy, nuclear power are the right thing, but so is a global deal on climate change in which every country fulfills its responsibilities. But although aid isn't everything, aid really, really does matter. We have trebled aid to Africa in the last 11 years. Let's turn that into people. That means 30 million children are going to school who otherwise wouldn't be going to school. It means that 3 million people have been lifted out of poverty. That is the difference that a Labour government makes. But it's also the difference that committed leadership makes on international development. Gordon, it's not just the policies. It is no exaggeration to say you have transformed the political debate about international development in this country over the last 11 years, and we should take inspiration from that as we move forward. promoting democracy, promoting human rights, tackling inequality. These are our values. My brother Ed said on Saturday, let's take back our language. And he was right to do so. But our commitment is also to sharing responsibility. Our founders came together in cooperatives and trade unions because they knew that shared problems needed shared solutions. It's still true today, but it's true on the global scale, not just on the local. Not global government, but a United Nations fit for 2015, not for 1945. Global rules on everything from nuclear proliferation to economic stability. We need that collective solution today. We need a transatlantic alliance that brings together Europe and America, that overcomes the divisions of the Iraq War and recognizes that the values that hold us together are the right values to build an inclusive system that includes the Chinese, the Indians, the Brazilians as they become the great powers of the 21st century. And it also requires something else. A European Union with a strong voice in the world. A European Union that is not bogged down in institutional squabbling, but actually stands up for our values on the important issues where they can make a difference to add to national power. We've got to be very, very plain with people about this. But the plainer we are, the stronger our argument. The European Union does involve sharing sovereignty in important areas. Not on tax, and not on defense, where we retain our own national rights, but in important areas nonetheless. And here there is a big difference between Labour and Tory. David Cameron says he wants to pull back from the European Union, pull back from what he sees as too much cooperation. Answer me this, Mr. Cameron. How are you going to lead the European Union on climate change, as you say you want to, when you've said that your first act in Europe will not be about climate change, it will be to renegotiate the social chapter that gives decent rights to working people in Britain? How are you going to lead the debate there? And answer me this, Mr. Cameron. How are you going to achieve the stronger European response on Russia that you say is necessary, unless you're willing to support a common energy policy that allows us to negotiate with Russia on a fair basis? And how on earth are you going to lead the world when you insist on dissing our strongest ally, the United States, and getting distance from our nearest allies in Europe? The truth is you can't and you won't lead the world on that basis. Conference, we've been here before. We've been here before. Just think back to the years before 1997. We were not leading the world in April 1997 before we took over. We were ignored by the world, held in pity by our friends and contempt by those who wish us ill. In 1997, the aid budget was not going up, it was going down. And in 1997, never forget, we were not a country leading the banning of landmines and cluster munitions. The Tories were busy making them. That is the difference between a Labour government and a Tory government. Now is not the time to turn back. We should be out there, active, engaged, around the world, pursuing our values, persuading people about them, putting them into practice. That's what we should be doing. So just as I hate defeatism about our country, defeatism that says we won't make a difference, so let's not bother to try, defeatism that stands in the way of the evidence, just as I hate defeatism about our country, I hate defeatism about our party. These Tories are beatable. Let's say it with conviction. Let's say it with conviction. These Tories are beatable. They are beatable, these Tories. Of course government is tough. It's meant to be. It's meant to be. Every day we have to prove ourselves, rightly. But the toughest day in government is 10 times better than the easiest day in opposition, not for us, but for the people that we represent. Look back on 11 years in government. Look back on 11 years with pride, but look forward with excitement about what more we can do. We know what we believe in this party, that everyone should have a fair chance, and those who succeed should put something back. That if government isn't on your side, then it's a world of sink or swim. That the fair society is a necessity, not a strapline. And also, that an age of massive change needs leadership from a party dedicated to change. We know those things. We know those things. The greatest pride we should take is not in those things that we have finished. The greatest pride in those things that we have started and want to build on. Every day in government is a privilege. Each day in government is a chance to change our country. Together, let us earn the privilege. Let us seize the opportunity. And above all, let us prove the fatalists wrong. Thank you very much.